So one of the questions that partners and customers keep asking me is, how do we save costs on our AWS or Azure hosting for our Sage X3 or any other application that uses Azure or AWS virtual machines? And if your workload is based on Windows Server and SQL Server, then there is a chance of you being able to reduce your costs significantly by splitting your workload between Windows and Linux. So the way it works is, if you're, for example, going to install Sage X3 or your other application on Windows Server on Amazon, um, chances are you'll be installing it on a single server, which has, say, 8 cores and 32 gigs of RAM. So the problem with that is because SQL Server and Windows Server both are actually licensed per core. So if you go to this Microsoft website, which explains how SQL licensing works, and this applies to Windows Server as well, you will see that both enterprise and standard editions of SQL Server are, licensed per core. So if you've got 8 cores on that Windows Server, you're basically paying for 8 cores for SQL, while not all of those 8 cores are going to be used by SQL Server, right? Because we've got other applications running on that server. So it wouldn't be fair for us to pay SQL Server core license for all of those cores. So one way of saving is basically splitting that server into, say, 2 servers, of one with SQL Server on it and has 4 cores, and the other server has the rest of the applications which are not, core-based licensed. So this way you can reduce your cost significantly. If I go to, just to show you how it works, if I go to AWS Cost Explorer or AWS Cost Calculator, if you go here, just create an estimate, just show you how different it is when you do that kind of workload. And the benefit of that is you're basically splitting your workload across 2 servers, so chances of better performance and higher reliability are going to be higher. I'm just going to go to Sydney for my data center, and I'm just going to go to EC2 for my Elastic Cloud Computing. Click and configure. So just showing you one example. So this is going to be a Windows server with 8 cores and 32 gigs of RAM. So this is my first scenario where I have a Windows server which has SQL Server Standard on it, and I go with 8 cores and 32 gigs of memory. If I go with the cheapest server, which is Versatile, I go with this one and save. Right, so I'm going to add this. If I go to summary, I'll see that this server is going to cost me around 979 USD per month. Right, so because this is basically, I'm paying 8 core licenses for SQL Server and Windows Server. So let us now compare. So if I go and go to my second scenario where I say, okay, EC2 again, configure that. This time I'm going to go a single Windows server, and this time I'm not going to install SQL Server on this one. And this time I'll go with 4 cores and 16 gigs of data, and choose the T3X Large. I'm going to name this, I did want to name that, save that, and now add another EC2, and this time I'm going to put Linux on it. I'm going to choose a free version of Linux, which is Amazon Linux on Amazon, or you can go with any other Linux distro which you need. So I go Linux and SQL, doesn't like ampersand. So in here I'm going to say Linux and SQL Server Standard, and I'm going to put 4 gigs of RAM there, and 30 and 16 gigs of RAM, and 4 CPUs there and 16 gigs of RAM here. And I'm going to choose C3 Cloud again. So I'm basically splitting my workload, same amount of memory. And if I go here, now if I go to view summary, you will see that in my first scenario, I was actually paying 979 USD per month for the entire workload. In the second scenario, I'm paying $139 for the Windows server and $436 for the Linux server. So I'm paying around less than 600 USD per month compared to 979 um, for a single server architecture. That's a significant cost saving for customers. And the good news is this is a Linux server which is completely owned by you, so you have full root access to it, and you can install some of the extra components on that Linux server. So I basically recommend installing a runtime component next to SQL, so it's faster. So in my next video, I'm going to show you how you can install X3 runtime next to your SQL Server on Linux and the rest of your component on your Windows Server, and you can connect these two together so you have a cost-effective architecture for your customers. Thank you.